Autonomous agents. Okay. Oh, the recording has started. Thanks, Bruce. So yes, we're going to be looking at autonomous agents and how they can work with you to deliver measurable outcomes. As well as looking at autonomous agents, we'll touch on multi-agent approaches as well to solve business problems. So this is really going into a little bit deeper than just simple agents. We'll be looking at how we can do that and how we can use agents in our everyday lives for working, etc. Um, so just to remind everybody, this is being recorded. You're going to be shared with you afterwards. I'm also going to share a link to the slides in a little bit at the end as well, so you'll be able to get these slides. And yes, there is a feedback poll. Please fill that in. That's useful for us. So, what's the issue we're facing? For me, agents is very exciting. Well, first of all, we only started calling them agents recently. So terminology is changing all the time. MCP is brand new, being added in. There's lots of new capabilities such as MCP tools. There's also it's literally there's Microsoft just published it this week their release notes for the next set of releases. There's a whole list of changes and new features coming in. So keeping up with what's happening in terms of agents is quite difficult, and especially around multi-agent. How we can do that is changing. So when am I going to use them? How I'm going to use them is changing. So stuff that I did last year is so out of date. And I do it differently now because of the new features. So that's really what we're going to try and address and help you understand what's happening with agents. So why am I the right person? Well, I it's interesting. I work across, I think, the three major Microsoft platforms for building Copilot agents. You've got Microsoft 365 Copilot. Who invited Fireflies? Sorry, we're recording it separately. I don't appreciate people adding in their own, so we tend to remove those. Sorry about that. It's gone, I think. Hold on, let me see if it's gone. Fireflies, no. Bye. We don't appreciate those. Sorry about that. Sorry, I don't allow AI recording. We're recording this for you. You don't need to use your own Fireflies or other ones. Sorry, I work across the three major platforms for agents. So we've got Microsoft 365 Copilot, where you can build declarative agents. You've got Copilot Studio for building low code or no code agents. And you've got Microsoft Foundry for building code based agents. And it's interesting how much Microsoft is merging these together. In fact, I think that one of the release plans is actually going to make part of, as I saw yesterday, is going to make part of what I'm going to say now slightly wrong because it's going to change. But that's the world we're living in. But I think it's important to understand the capabilities of each of the three platforms, so know which to use and when. But Microsoft is making it easier for us. The ability, and we'll talk a bit about this, about how a lot of the features that are in one are moving to the other. So things that, if I look back 6 months ago, there were certain things I could only do in Foundry. Now I can do them in Copilot Studio as well. And things I can only do in Studio, I'll be able to do in Microsoft 365 Copilot. There's a lot of work going on to make a lot of similarities behind the scenes to allow us to work with agents consistently. And as well as that, I'm not going to get into it. We've also got things like the Agent 365 service, which has just been announced, which is the underlying governance platform for all of these agents, no matter whether you build them with Copilot, with Microsoft 365 Copilot, with Copilot Studio, or with Foundry. A little bit about myself. I'm Julian Sharp. My main job is building solutions, business solutions for people, and I've been building chatbots for over a decade now with various different technologies and various different tools, both Microsoft and non-Microsoft. So I tend to build solutions around the Power Platform and AI, and I've been using Microsoft AI in my solutions for well over a decade. Yep. So if you have problems with sound, you're probably best off dropping out and coming back in. Okay, so just a little bit. So this is about me, about Readynez as well. You here, so you know a bit about Readynez. But yes, we've got lots of courses. I do a lot of training for them. Right, what I want you to do now is I need a little bit about you. So you can either click in the link I put in the chat, that'll take you directly in, or if you've got a phone, you can scan the QR code, or you can go to menti.com and key in the number. And this is just a little bit about to help me understand where you are. So there's the Mentimeter little quiz. Can't wait for you to join. We've got 19 of you joined, 20, yes. And this is useful for me to help me understand where everybody is. I gave a little presentation back in November, which is like an introduction to agents. This is and it was interesting what we had there. I'll be interested in what you see now because we've moved on a lot in the last 6 months. No, I didn't hear what Joachim said. If you haven't, yeah, so yeah. All right. Yeah, thanks for that. I didn't realize you wouldn't hear that. Um, yeah, drop down. Let me start. Okay, let's get into this. So, first question. This question I love to ask because it really emphasizes how much things have changed when we talk about agents. Originally, we used to talk about bots, but then bots became synonymous with hacking. So we started talking about chatbots for chatting. Microsoft then started talking about Copilot. Um, and they talked about Copilot and custom Copilot. Now we tend to refer to custom Copilots as agents. So when we say Copilot, Microsoft generally is referring to facilities that Microsoft provides. It's an AI or agent that Microsoft has built into its products. So you got Copilot for security, you got Microsoft 365 Copilot. Um, Agent tends to be used for things that we customly build. But generally, all of the above, you'll find different people when you talk to different people, they will use these words, and you just need to make sure you understanding what they're talking about. Also, my background is actually call centers, and agents were generally referred to people. They were humans who answered the phones in call centers. So we tend to refer to human agents as representatives now. You'll see that wording change: customer service representatives or service representatives or service reps. For humans, agents, generally referring to something that uh, has a sort of natural language interface for it. So let's thank you for that. Oh, let's see what the next slide says. What have you used? So some of you have got Copilot Studios. Agent Builder is building agents within the Microsoft 365 Copilot. Um, um, some of you got Foundry. One machine learning. Oh, yes, okay. None. That's fair enough. Uh, Using different features. And all of these here can build agents or chatbots or chat type interfaces. Whether you use Azure AI Services, OpenAI Service, Foundry on here. But yeah, a number of you build Copilot Studio, but most of you seem to have experience with Microsoft 365 Copilot. That's interesting just on that. I think that's because it's getting more widely adopted. So what we're going to do today is we're going to first of all, look at different types of agent just to set the scene and level set us. Then we're going to look about how agents designed to work alongside humans, enhancing productivity and decision making. We'll then look at autonomous agents and how autonomous agents can make decisions and take actions with and without human intervention. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Adopting to dynamic environments. We'll then look at multi-agent approach, how we can use that to help solve more complex problems, actually make your agents easier to build and manage, which we'll get onto. We'll then look at the different tools and services around building autonomous agents and multi-agents. That's what we're going to focus on today. Not going to look at the wider tools and services. And then look at what's happening with the training, because Microsoft is investing hugely in upcoming there's a lot of changes to the training and certifications coming up around agents, because it's very much the Microsoft's focus now. So this basic session is designed for anybody who's interested in using agents within their organizations. It's if you're building already with Copilot Studio, you might find something out about how you build and manage agents, or if you're a developer who's got a bit of experience understanding a bit more about multi-agent approaches. So what's out there? So when we look at agents, we need to understand the different types of agents and different capabilities. And that's what we're going to touch on today and see where we are. So first of all, I like to explain the differences between the different types of agent, the difference between copilots, AI, and autonomous agents. I think it's useful to understand this. Most people's experience with agents are with what we call prompt and response agents. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, whether you use the Copilot app or using Copilot paid within, say, PowerPoint or Word, that's what we tend to refer to as a prompt and response agent. A prompt and response agent reacts to user prompts and provides responses. So you craft and we're not going to go into how you do prompt engineering, but you generally provide prompts. It'll go away. It'll use its general knowledge or maybe specific knowledge, which is also known as RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to go and provide the response. Now, the key thing about prompt and response agents, they don't maintain long-term goals. They're not autonomous. They're basically reactive. They sit there, wait for you to ask it to do something, then it responds. So a chatbot. Okay, so you ask questions, you get responses, and it's sat there. That's what most chatbots, like traditional chatbots, fall in that. We've then got agents, often referred to them as task agents. So this is where an agent can do things on your behalf. Okay, so a task-based agent, you can go and do this. So have any of you got experience of using Microsoft 365 Copilot and using the researcher agent? So I'll just go into, if I get mine up, what I mean by that is I'm in Microsoft 365 and I'm in Microsoft 365 Copilot app. If you've got a license for Copilot, you should see these research and analyst agents. So the researcher is an thing where I can go say, here's what I did the other day. Look at it. I ask it to perform a whole series of tasks and we go look at it and it went through it. It did 118 steps. Okay, this is a task-based agent where I asked it to produce a marketing plan for my Contoso Chai tea market, and I used a spreadsheet with some market trends. I asked it to go and find some information on this. So it went through some questions and it did this 118 steps. This is a task-based agent, and this is the output it generated. It generated a whole load of output. So this is one of the built-in, or I call pre-built agents within Microsoft 365 Copilot. There's a couple, there's researcher and analyst. So I just want to give an example. It's an example of a task-based agent. You can ask it to produce a specific task. It's goal-orientated. My goal was to create a marketing plan, and it involved multiple steps in here, and it planned and it reasoned and used various different tools and knowledge to go and complete that task. But it has limited autonomy. It stops after it's finished now. Okay, it's do that. So and sometimes they can hook into external services. They can go call in and perform actions on external services as well. So Microsoft 365 Copilot sort of comes into this because you can ask it to create an email or do things, but it still typically doesn't do. It still requires you to actually perform the final action. You may ask it to allow it to, and what we often now refer to as tools in agents are what allows to do things. So we can go through this, we can take as a researcher agent, ask it to go do more things, or I can create agents that can allow me to go do things, and especially with external systems through APIs. There's lots of different ways we can do that. Sorry, somebody's using interpreter, that's fine. Sorry, just popped up a message. You can turn on interpreter. I'll try and speak more slowly. If I'm, yeah, this popped up. There's AI in this meeting. Okay, just on, we've got 100 people now. Wow. Okay. Thanks for that. Let's see if we've got anything else. Any other questions? If you have any questions, just ask in the chat as you go through. Do that. Okay, so thanks. So the other type of agent, which we're going to get to, is really an autonomous agent. So what is an autonomous agent? It's essentially an AI that operates with persistent goals. Like it sits there and waits. We're asking it to do something, and it's sitting there and it's taking action, or it's triggering and performing actions based without me giving it a prompt essentially. So we talk about it maintaining long-term objectives or persistent goals. And it will self-initiate. We talk about it getting triggered by certain things like an email arriving or a record being changed in a database or a file being uploaded. Or maybe I can have an agent that runs run on a schedule, does this. So we can trigger it automatically on an event. And it can decide what it's doing based on the environment it's in. And it'll use things like memory. So memory is remembering what it's done. It'll plan what it needs to do. And it also learns. It can capture a feedback loop and become better as it goes along. So essentially, we have autonomous agents that can sit there and react and take action. So it's a mixture of it can do what a task agent does, but it can do a lot more. It can actually go and decide and adapt to the situation it's in, and doesn't require human. But we're going to talk about human oversight later, which I think is quite important about autonomous agents. We just want to try what the different types of agents are. So you can have a trading bot there that monitors markets and makes decisions, or an AI assistant that schedules meetings proactively and learns your preferences. That's the key here. And actually, if you use Microsoft 365 Copilot, it actually learns your preferences. I don't know if you've used Microsoft 365 Copilot a lot. It'll learn what you do, and I like, for instance, I find Microsoft 365 Copilot very chatty. It gives very long responses. I always tell it to give response in 25 words or less, or 100 words or less, and it learns that, and it'll give a response and say in your preferred status, and allows me to say, do you want to expand on that? It'll learn. You can also give it extra hints to help you. So Microsoft 365 Copilots. So just to talk about this again, when we talk about as an AI assistant. So Microsoft often refers to Copilot as an agent that's designed to work alongside you. It's your AI assistant. Okay, so Microsoft Copilots generally don't, they're not autonomous generally. They're built into Microsoft products, or you got Microsoft Copilot Chat, or Copilot in Sales, or the Sales Copilot, which I've got running. Copilot for Security, GitHub Copilot if you want to write code. There's lots and lots of these where Microsoft has built them in, but they generally pitch Microsoft Copilot or Copilots as an assistant. It's your program. If you get GitHub Copilot, it's your pair programmer. If you're working inside Dynamics, it's something that gives you hints and helps you work more efficiently. So it's all about personal productivity generally with Microsoft Copilots. Yeah, they're pre-built into the different products. So it's up there, so on the slides. So sorry, slides. I didn't realize I had what should we call it? A animation in there. So this is an idea just to say what Microsoft frames Copilot is. Yeah, it's a human-centered companion. So it's an AI that adapts to you, reduces your work, amplifies your judgment, rather than automating it away. So generally within Copilots, they're designed to augment you. They help you think, they help you plan, they help you decide on your terms, and give you oversight into what you're doing. And if you are going to use Copilots within Microsoft products, you should treat them like a teammate. If you give them the right context, if you give them the right goals, you're going to get very good behavior. So we often say humans plus AI is better than each alone. So it's better working together. So that's what we're just talking about, what we mean by AI assistants. We're now going to go beyond that and talk about autonomous agents, how they work. So we mentioned that autonomous agents sit there and they decide when to work. So we often refer to these as invisible helpers. So these are not like Copilot, which is your human assistant. Autonomous agents are invisible to you generally. They sit there. They will wait for something to happen. They will handle tasks autonomously, which means they're without your input generally, or you can decide how much input you want. They can surface results to help you work as well, or they can go take decisions on their own. often in dynamic environments. So often we say we perceive their and understand their environment, and that can be through software inputs, events that happen in external systems, things that happen, events such as receiving an email or a record being updated, or even through real time data through sensors if you want. So they're taking signals in, and they're looking at signals and then deciding when to ask. Autonomous agents also analyze that information intelligently to help predict outcomes. So they're going to be using language models, deep learning model to select optimal actions. They will often go through planning to decide what to do. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Autonomous agents can go and break the goals into smaller tasks. And then, so essentially, they plan the tasks and sequences. And one of the benefits of autonomous agents, they can that's not fixed. It's not like automation. I'm a big fan of automation generally. I've done a lot of automation in my career. But when you build automations, you're building a very defined path. You're building something that you say, this is declarative, it works in this way. Autonomous agents, we want them to adapt and plan and act differently depending on as the conditions change. They say they execute autonomously without requiring step-by-step instructions. They interact with tools or APIs and other systems, but we can also introduce human oversight. I'm going to talk a bit more about this later, that we actually don't want them necessarily running. At some points, we may want some human input, and we'll talk more about that later. And hopefully they learn from the results to refine future decisions. And this is another way of looking at this. Just understand how they work. So they perceive signals, they interpret the context they're in. And so they handle the input, they perceive where they are. And from that, they reason. They plan and decide using goals. So your autonomous agent will have some sort of goal that's given to it. Generally, when you build an agent, you give it a set of instructions. And it uses those instructions to decide what to do. It'll go plan, what do I need to do? Including that is maybe breaking down the task into smaller parts. I mean, even if I look at that researcher agent I showed you earlier, I gave it a task and it broke it down into 118 steps, which is actually the most I've ever seen it do. Generally, it's around 50. But for that one, it went a little bit wild. On the steps, it took it a little while. So the autonomous agent will typically be linked to your knowledge. So knowledge sources such as your databases, your files, it will use that knowledge, that enterprise knowledge, to understand and ground what it's working on, to give it more context. It will use tools to go perform actions, or even go to connect to databases and other things and perform actions. So it reasons and plans. It then decides it then acts, it then goes, performs, it uses that decision to do it. And again, we work with one thing that's very important when you're building agents, to give it guardrails. So these are, give it the bounds, scope of what it can act. When you give an agent instructions, you say what it can and can't do. You've also got services such as Microsoft Content Safety, which will restrict access to certain harmful content. And you can use things like Microsoft Purview to restrict access and govern its data access and performance. And we're going to get later on into, when it goes into taking actions, into often into a multi-agent system. We'll look more at multi-agent, which is the next step beyond autonomous agents. But key point is, we retain autonomy, transparency, we audit, and we will have human oversight as well. And that's what I want to talk about next. So human oversight. So Microsoft, you'll see this term human in the loop. You may see this coming if you've looked at Copilot Studio. You may see this coming as one of the latest changes. So essentially, human in the loop is where we have an autonomous agent, but human oversight where it matters. We don't want our human. I remember going to one customer. This was before agents, and I was sat at interviewing the director of operations. And while I was doing, they were just pressing a button. They were just click onto the system, just clicking a button, going approve, 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 approve. When they, because everything flowed through them, they were the single most biggest bottleneck in the application. But all they did was approve everything. They never not approved. So sometimes we want agents to do things without requiring somebody to just press a button. And that's what we want to do here. But we want at certain points, human judgment may be required. It's either maybe entering some data, so the agent needs some extra bit of information to proceed, or it's an approval. We need the human to approve what the agent's going to do. So the agent summarized, I've come up with this plan, I've worked out what we want to do. Do you agree, human? And off it goes and does that. So essentially, you define as part of the guardrails. You define for your agent when approvals are needed. Okay, so we still retain control within our autonomous agents. It's not just agents going to go off and do its own thing. So if you ever seen War Games film or Terminator, we're not into that realm of things. So I think human in the loop becomes very important where you've got tasks or actions involve some sort of risk or compliance or ethical judgment is required. They're good examples. So maybe sensitive operations or things that are irreversible. I don't know if you heard about an agent. There was Amazon, I think it's Amazon this week or last week, where they deployed an agent which decided to, because of what it was doing, they gave it access into the live system and it decided to rebuild their entire system, take it down. Their website was down for like 4 hours or something because an agent decided. There was no human oversight because that was a very irreversible decision. So the idea is agents operate autonomously, but when in here, so we can step in maybe for security checks, compliance reviews, checking we're still working responsibly. And a good idea may be to have approval gates. So you set up in your agent, say, okay, it's part of the instructions. If you at this point ask a human to approve the plan or ask the human to approve the outcomes before they go and execute the actions. So one thing this is, it allows, I like the idea of human loop is the agent can do all the low level stuff, the low risk tasks, and then bring humans in when their judgment can apply. This is a lot of the work that generally I do day to day. It's very repetitive, low risk stuff, and I can farm that out to an agent to do for me. And I have agents to do this, but I can also set them autonomously. So again, we want to maybe put this in to say, make sure we've got a very structured process for our autonomous agents. So some sort of scenarios. Here's a really good one. You've got customer support. This is really my background. My background was how I got into business solutions was I built call centers. So I've worked in this a lot. And with call center, you've got a lot of different things going off, and there's an awful lot of repetitive work. And often you get this thing where people will become the bottlenecks because they're the ones deciding how to route the tickets or to prioritize the tickets. So what we can do is I can have autonomous agents. I mean, I used to do this with just automation. I had automation going in, and I once, if I go back about 10 years ago, I was working in an organization that got like 10,000 emails a week. We had a massive backlog in emails, and I built a machine learning model. I use Azure Machine Learning. I use Azure AI Cognitive, or what's now called Azure AI Service, we'll call Cognitive Service there, to try and figure out what the emails were about, try and figure out what their priority was, and how we could route them. And I must have taken 6 months to do that. I had to collect a lot of data. I collected all the data that came in the system, looked at what happened, looked at the outcomes, and it took me about 6 months to build that. But then it was very rigid. Because it was essentially a step-by-step process. It was a if this, then do that. It wasn't very adaptable. And when you work in the business, things change all the time. So, right, if I was doing that again, I'd be building an autonomous agent. We can look at all the factors and decide, okay, based on historical data, look at what we've got in the system, use the enterprise knowledge that we have, maybe build some rules. I'll give it some guardrails to work under. So it can go and maybe prioritize that email, assign tickets to the right team, make sure if nothing happens, this was one of my biggest problems, things got dropped, missed and things like that. Make sure we escalate if necessary. Create automated responses. We'll get When you work in the public body and you get lots and lots of emails, you get a lot of rubbish coming through. But again, we can help us understand and give it. I would now build that to learn what to do and understand what it's going to do, build it. So we can use autonomous agents to basically do a lot of that work, and I've done it. I could have probably done that in a few days and built that now. If I look at what I did back 10 years ago. DevOps, if you're doing anything where you're working or any sort of operation where you're getting lots and lots of issues coming up, you're running through pipelines or processes, we can monitor how those processes are going. So it's not just DevOps, but I think any process. We're going to monitor all the logs, we're monitoring the metrics, detect anomalies, automatically fix things and things are going wrong. So again, if I look back at that customer, we were doing, it was the UK Ombudsman, where we were taking in complaints about telecoms and energy companies. And we had a complex process. And again, I built lots of automation to make sure that process was being done. I'd now use an autonomous agent to monitor the progress of all the support of all the cases, running checks on them to make sure the users were working properly. Again, that was a bane of my life, monitoring what the users were doing and make sure they were doing things in the right order. So yeah, any sort of process I can monitor, create, flag things up, maybe remind people to do things. Or if I'm in another example, finance or any sort of procurement operation, we can monitor the expense levels. We can detect unusual behaviors, maybe automate steps. I know on my accounting system that I've got, it's got its own AI now to do automated things. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure on finance, some of the deep stuff, but some of the stuff on expenses it does is quite nice. It basically fills in things for me and just gives me it does a lot of work, and I just go, yeah, that looks right. Okay, move ahead. I've still got my human oversight in there. So a number of scenarios where you can use autonomous agents. Okay, we're about halfway through. That's good. Um, any questions in the chat? We're now going to talk about multiple agent systems. Now, you don't have to have an autonomous agent to do multi-agent. You can do a task-based agent that uses a multi-agent approach, but you can also use multi-agent, even actually in any of the types of agent. So whether it's a task retrieve, prompt and response agent, a task agent, autonomous agent. But often we see this better with autonomous agents. So what is a multi-agent approach? Well, say I've got a complex process. If I try and build a single agent to handle a complex set of processes or complex process, to get it to work, I have to give it a lot of instructions and maybe add in lots of knowledge and add in lots of tools. And the trouble, when you make your agent more complex, it can sometimes struggle to know what to do because it's just one agent trying to do everything. It's like I've always said, you should always break down tasks and automate those to get better solutions. And this is the idea of multi-agent is you break down into separate agents. Each agent is focused on a particular task or role. You give each agent its own knowledge, its own instructions, and then you tell it to work together to unlock. And this is one of the best ways of building agents for more complex scenarios. So they get the agents working together instead of working alone. What you do is you have agents that interact, coordinate, and share responsibilities. Now we're going to get into how this works in a bit. How would you go set up? Because there's different approach, there's different solutions to multi-agent. But we're just talking here in general about what we're doing. And by being multi-agent, you make the system more your agent solution more adaptable, more scalable as well, and capable of handling more complex tasks. You get smarter outcomes because you're not just one agent struggling to answer everything. Each agent can focus. Let me take the scenario we had before with the customer support where we had an agent. I talked about an agent to prioritize an email, to classify an email, to route the email. That's actually a really good scenario for actually doing a multi-agent approach. Because I'll have one agent do the prioritization, one agent to do the routing, and another agent maybe to classify what needs to be done, what's the actions we need to take. Because then I can make very small agents that focus on that specific task. And then it makes it easier to test and debug them because each agent is a separate agent. I can test it, make sure it's working. They become faster because it's not having to plow through so much knowledge and instructions and planning and reasoning that they go through. So multi-agent is about making things more scalable, more adaptable to different scenarios because each one can do different things, and they would handle more and more complex tasks. They also become faster because we're not just having one agent sit there planning for 5 minutes. Each agent's, because it's more focused, can be faster and working here. So the idea is rather than have one big agent, let the agent try to figure out the tasks. We're basically focusing to smaller focus responsibility. And there's a couple of different ways we do this. We can have a main or orchestrator agent, which delegates work to sub-agents. That's one approach. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to show you that later. Or you can have agents that essentially collaborate. Yeah, that's a good example. I like that, Joachim. That's a machine that, you build things that do one thing and they do it well. Yeah, you don't want to boil vegetables to unfreeze them. Yeah, so typically a couple of approaches to multi-agent. One is you have an orchestrator agent calling sub-agents or child agents, depending where you are. And the other one is where you have agents that essentially they just talk to each other. There's different ways we can do that. They're all equivalent and they decide amongst themselves what they're doing and they collaborate. So you can have agents that classify issues, retrieve knowledge, analyze data, and generally work together to create richer, more accurate results than a single agent could ever do. And again, it's about scaling. Now, this is basically Microsoft's vision. They see having more agents than humans, not just having a single agent that got a whole raft of agents working for you autonomously and actually coordinating amongst themselves, which is why Microsoft wants to license agents rather than humans. Okay, and there's a number of different ways they can communicate. There's now a protocol called A2A, called agent to agent, which I'll talk about later, but let's talk about it now. So there's a couple of different ways. Agent to agent is the equivalent of MCP. So if you don't know, Microsoft Model Context Protocols become very popular with agents because it's a way of connecting agents to tools, to APIs, to systems. And it's very much blown up as the way for my agent to perform tasks. With MCP, we talk about it's a generic protocol for agents to talk to systems. There's lots of MCP servers out there. A2A is the equivalent for multi-agent. It basically allows any agent to talk to any other agent. So with A2A, we can connect to agents built in Google or Copilot Studio or Foundry. And essentially with A2A, the agents can hand off tasks to each other or request help or collaborate without having a custom orchestrator agent. So generally two approaches, I'll say. They can either have an orchestrator agent with sub-agents, or you can have an age with A2A or some other options as well. Semantic kernel allows this, or what's now the Microsoft Agent Framework. You can have agents that can coordinate. So this is, I think one of the key things in here is it's multi-agent allows you to support more real world, more complex scenarios. Essentially, multiple agents collaborate to gather information, reason over the data, plan the next steps, and then perform actions. So what are some of the benefits of a multi-agent approach? I sort of hit some of these already. You get better performance overall, like in terms of performance in how long your agent takes to actually run, because it can pass off the task. One of the things you can do is ask the subtasks to work in parallel. not just sequentially. There's different orchestration methods we can use. So rather than doing sequential step through tasks, each agent does one task and passes to the next. We can actually ask the agent to work in parallel. We get higher accuracy because just like anything else, the more precise the prompt you give, the more precise the answer is, the more relevant the answer is, or more accurate it is. Um, so you have specialized agents that focus on very narrow things where they have their own specific context, their own specific knowledge. And this it works very well. You've got complex workflows and complex processes. Each agent does its own thing, then they work together. And with a multi-agent approach, it can decide which agents use in which order or which agents use at all. Say it becomes more scalable. It's easier to develop them and test them because you can build and test each agent on its own. It's just like when you write code, you build little functions, you test each function, you do your unit testing, and then you bring it all together to do your full test. And it also allows you to be more adaptable because as things change, you can add in extra new agents rather than having to. I've done this before where you just had a single agent. I've done this where I want to add a bit more to an agent. I had to go add in some instructions and I tested it. It didn't work. It took me a long time crafting the instructions to get the agent to behave how I wanted it to. With a multi-agent approach, it's a lot easier. I just create another agent, tell it to collaborate, and that agent, and then tell the other agents about the other agent. That's where we get into how they know about each other and how they communicate. You build a new agent, then you tell the agent, the other agents, either through A2A or other ways of saying, okay, this is agent here can help you with this bit of the process or scenario. But having a clear separation responsibility makes it easier to sort out issues, trace issues, and maintain your agent solution. Also, if an individual error agent fails, you still got the other agents there to help with the process and decision making. And I think the real final one is more complex, multi-step problems to deal with. Say, take complex tasks such as billing or logistics. A single agent might struggle with those. Do it. You get more flexibility because this is another big one. Often when you build an agent, you choose which language model you're using. And if you just have a single agent, you're going to have one agent for everything. I can actually, if I have multi-agent approach, I can have certain agents that use certain models. So certain language models are more effective at performing certain tasks or performing certain sort of reasoning. So I might have some agents that use just like a very quick model, or I might use a deep reasoning model for a different agent. Or I might do something, or another one, an agent might have some specialized tools. Like I need to maybe do some calculations. Language models aren't very good at maths generally, but maybe I can bring in some tools or some like the code interpreter tool, or maybe my own custom tools to perform calculations just on that agent. And I think also, in a long time, we've talked about when we build solutions. We used to build big monolithic applications and we sort of broke them down into microservices with event-driven systems, very much how I build solutions now. I use event-driven architectures. The multi-agent approach is that same idea where it fits into sort of modern enterprise architecture. We're building smaller, more adaptable solutions. And also, as things change, so maybe you design an agent for a process and you want to, like my procurement process, I've got an agent, multi-agent solution for procurement. Maybe some rules change or something else. It makes it easier to adapt as well as that. And just don't remember, we can still with a multi-agent, we can still integrate with human in the loop approvals and handoffs and data entry as necessary. So when we look at multi-agent, this diagram here talks about having a coordinator. This is an example of a coordinator agent or orchestrator agents, how I tend to refer them, with worker agents or sub-agents or child agents. They're the terms that are used. I'm just going to talk. We're now going to switch to Microsoft. What does Microsoft help us with? So when we build, just before we do this, it's just a couple of things I think are quite useful when you're building an agent. An agent is generally linked to a language model. Each agent has its language model you select. We give it instructions. So instructions are our guidelines. It's probably the most important thing in an agent, which says what it does. You can tell it how to work. You can tell it what it can do, what it can't do. You also going to, and what it does, it takes input. And if you're into autonomous agents, they can not just be user prompts. We're into system events or even messages from other agents because agents can work autonomously. Uh, it generates output. Okay, it can either be a message to another agent if they're coordinating or structured output for our user. And they use tools. So tools are things that it performs. So these could be external services, they could be connectors, they could be APIs, MCP servers, but generally they perform different actions and also retain some sort of memory. Now, when I come to build an agent, often we look at the different bits of it. So this is just a diagram where we talk about where we're building our own custom agents. There will be the orchestrator part. Now, depending, this is where the different Microsoft tools have different capabilities and how much you can do. So we've got some level of orchestration. We can use instructions to help us with that orchestration, but when we get into more complex scenarios, we've got more control over the orchestration. We can use knowledge, which is known as RAG or grounding, so we can connect to knowledge sources. We can, I say, connect to tools. And generally with an agent, it does its own planning in its autonomy. We've also got here what happens if it errors, if it finds an error, what it should do, and also how it gets triggered if it's an autonomous agent. Then we can connect it to other agents if we want, and then deploy it to different web applications or different channels. And we want to have full control over its hosting, scaling, and life cycle. To build agents, I say right at the beginning, I said Microsoft has three different platforms effectively. You can build agents in Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's called Agent Builder. This is a slide. They called it Copilot Studio Lite for a minute. It's now called Agent Builder. That's where we build what we call declarative agents. Now, one thing about declarative agents you build, like researcher and analyst, these are. I'm going to talk. I'll try and answer that stuff for now. So these are agents. These are declarative agents. So what I did here, this is you can go create your own agents in here with these are declarative agents. The issue right now is declarative agents cannot be autonomous right now, and they're not multi-agent. They're just single retrieval agents, or maybe even task agents, because you can connect them to this. I can connect them to knowledge, I can give them capabilities, but they work within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. I'm not going to talk about these anymore because they don't fit autonomous or multi-agent. However, I thought I saw something yesterday in the release plans that the maybe I was trying to search for it before today, which basically said they are going to allow declarative agents to be autonomous. They or allowed to be triggered in a certain way, but I can't find it now. I was looking at the new release plans. Maybe I misinterpreted it. Maybe I didn't. Then you've got Copilot Studio, where you can build your own agents with no code, and then we've got Microsoft Foundry, where we can go build in code-based service where we're going to use things like the Microsoft Agent Framework to support us. So best practice I think to answer Stefano's question, best practice in terms of orchestration. Well, the different tools have different ways of doing it. I'm going to get to it in a minute. So I'll just talk about Copilot Studio as a tool. You can build agents in Copilot Studio. We can also build autonomous agents. So I've got here, I'm going to just bring in here and let's just show a little example I've got here. So I've got an agent called the Contoso Support Agent. So here's my agent. I've got some instructions. In here, it says what it does. It's going to analyze and answer questions about my Contoso coffee machines returns. And I've got it linked to some knowledge. I've got it linked to a PDF document. I've also got it linked to a database table where I've got a list of machine orders. I've also got it linked to some tools. I've got a custom prompt. I've got an MCP server for sending email, and I've got an agent flow to perform an order cancellation. Okay, so and what I've also got is I've got a trigger. So here's how we define autonomous agents. We take our agent, we just add a trigger. So I've got a trigger that says when an order status email arrives. If I was go into this, It's an email arriving with a particular to an email shared mailbox with the word order status in it. So it gets triggered if I email into my mailbox with that. And that's an autonomous trigger. This is now an autonomous agent. So the difference between a normal agent and an autonomous agent is really just the trigger in Copilot Studio. And again, what I've got, so I've got my knowledge in here. I've got tools to do things. Now, when we come to Copilot Studio, we have a couple of approaches for multi-agent. One, I can just go add in what's called a child agent. So a child agent is, so it's a lightweight agent within Copilot Studio. It can't run on its own if you do this. And this is where we have essentially my support agent would be the orchestrator agent, and I now have multiple child agents. Okay, and each child agent would have its own instructions. It can have its own tools. Okay, there's limitations on what it can do, but right now it can't run on its own behalf. Okay, it's thinking about it. Yeah, so I can go build my own agent. I can have its own instructions, its own knowledge, its own tools. Okay, so it has its own inputs and outputs. What does it? I can pass what data in. It can pass data back to the orchestrator agent. So that's what we can do. That's one way we can do it inside. Oh, where's my agent's gone? I can have multiple what I call child agents with it. But you need to, when you do this, your orchestrator agent, for me, when I do this, best practice on this one, if you have an orchestrator agent, then your orchestrator agent doesn't have knowledge. It doesn't have tools. The sub agents or child agents do that work. One thing, a restriction about these child agents in Copilot Studio, they can only work with this orchestrator agent. Okay, they only exist within. They don't exist on. If I'd gone back to my list of agents, you wouldn't have seen it there. The other way you can do in Copilot Studio is I can add in another agent. So I've got another agent here, Copilot Guide agent, which I've published. I can connect to another Copilot Studio agent. So this is more peer-to-peer. Okay, and again here you have to. Oh, it's just not connectable. But again, I can go give it and tell it how to work. So that's what my agent does. And what you do is you give it a description which says how it understands when they talk to each other. So you've got this option here, which is a Copilot Studio using another Copilot Studio. You can connect, and so these are just giving me all my Microsoft 365 my Copilot agents, or I can connect to a Microsoft Fabric agent, like a data agent. If I built an agent in Foundry, I can connect to it. Or you've got the thing called agent to agent, which is more peer-to-peer. So to answer your question, I think peer-to-peer with A2A is the way to go, because that allows you to connect to more agents than just built in Copilot Studio or Foundry. So you've got that here. If I was to go to Foundry, I already got time. If I was to go to Foundry, Foundry is building code-based agents. Now, one thing you get with Foundry, I've got more control over the orchestration within an agent. I've got more ability to say how it orchestrates, how it calls things. And we have a number, and when we get in, and it uses triggers, it's in preview at the moment. I think it uses logic apps as a trigger, similar to the way Copilot Studio uses Power Automate as a trigger. What you've got with Foundry is I can do child agent, or they call them sub agents in Foundry rather than child agents, and it works the same way. I can connect in, add in child agents, but essentially in Foundry, my sub agents are standalone agents. So any agent that I build in Foundry, I can talk to any other Foundry agent. So you can reuse sub agents across agents. You can also got A2A. You've also got the thing called Microsoft Agent Framework. The Agent Framework allows you to do more complex orchestration. It was part of what's called semantic kernel, now brought it in. We have a single agent framework that covers the semantic kernel, the agent service, Microsoft 365 agents, SDK, all in one thing. So when you get into Foundry and you start using the agent framework, I can build really complex orchestrations. We can have like agent, we can tell the agents to the sub agents to work in parallel, or we could have peer to peer. We can have things like the old way was having a single group chat, and the agents should chat amongst each other to decide what to do. Okay, so different approaches, but A2A is probably where we're going. It's all in preview at the moment. It's not actually been fully released as we saw there, but what you do is you set up an agent skill, which says, okay, I think it's a JSON or YAML file, which basically says this agent does this, and that's how they talk to each other. I've got 5 minutes left, so there's been a feedback. If you give some poll, you've got 16 responses. That's great. Thank you very much. More of you give your responses, how well we've done. And just in terms of training and certification now, we'll finish off with this. There's a lot of change. You may not be aware of this, but if you've done some of these before, you might see the numbers have changed. AI 900 is becoming AI 901, which is about introduction to Azure on AI and agents. AI 102, which was the Azure AI Engineer, which I teach, that's changing to the AI 103 next month. That's coming out. And that's going to be much more focused around agents than it is now. There's also another one, AI 302, which I teach regularly. That's about building agents in Foundry, and actually gets into the multi-agent and MCP stuff. That's actually a quite good one-day course. But there's going to be more coming out. Literally, Microsoft, there's loads of work going on right now, some of which I'm involved with, about recreating. So, for instance, if I'm in Copilot Studio, these are the relevant courses. We're currently revamping the PL 7008. Which is a course I wrote for Microsoft. We're currently ramping that to be much more about modern agents. So we're going to get into more generative AI and other things. There's also a new course coming out, probably Q2, so soon, April or May, which is not got a proper title yet. It's going to be it's a 3-day course. It's classed as Copilot Studio Developer, but this is where we get into MCP, multi-agent, autonomous agents. That's coming out, and I think that's going to be a really, really popular course because we're going to get into all of that. How to build, for me, it's how to build Copilot Studio agents properly. I'm doing the labs for that for Microsoft at the moment. If you want to get into the AB100, is really about it's a solution architect role, and it's already about deciding, okay, if I'm going to build agents, which way do I do it? Do I use and this we're going to cover all the things I've talked about today. Microsoft 365 Copilot with declarative agents, Copilot Studio and its agents, and Foundry with agents, and how they all work together. How do I build an ROI case for it? So it's very much yes. Yes, Yannick, it was recorded. It is being recorded. You will get the recording afterwards. And then I've got some resources. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a link to the slides. I'm going to pop that in the chat now, just so you can actually get these links. If you started with Copilot Studio, the Copilot Studio labs are actually quite a good way of getting started. There's different labs for different levels. You've got beginner, intermediate, and experts. You've got multi-agent and autonomous agents in there. If you want to learn more about Copilot Studio, Agent in a Day is a really good option if you want to do that. And I just threw this last little link because I think it's really important about choosing the right path. What should I use? It's a little Microsoft Learn module on that. So if you just, I quite like that one. I often share that with my students. It's not something it's not part of my training, but it's just a nice little, how do I go about picking the right way? I actually think that's probably a bit out of date on that. So key takeaways. Okay, we looked at how autonomous agent works, how they can help you work and enhance, get a bit beyond the AI assistant, which you've traditionally had with Copilot. We talked about multi-agent approaches, which for me is the release cyclist. And they're actually combining both autonomous and multi-agent together. If I'm building autonomous agents, they're probably for more complex things, and I'm probably going to want to use more of a multi-agent approach. I've talked about giving you a bit of hints about whether it's Microsoft 365 Copilot, Copilot Studio, or Foundry. They're the different services that help you give a bit of comparison on there and a bit on the skilling resources that are available. Right, do you have any questions? I'm 1 minute left at perfect timing. If you have any questions, stick your hand up or ask in the chat. If not, I'm going to say thank you very much for your attendance today. If you're onto where Readynez has unlimited training license, which allows you to come on lots of courses. I often see the same people coming to my courses because they want to learn a lot. There's a lot going on at the moment. We're in a massive change. So have a look at that for me. Our time is up on that. So thanks for this. I've given you your links. The recording will be emailed to you.